Hello, everyone. This is Wellness Mary, Mary Gundrum, and I am here with Lauren May from First House Astrology. And we're going to do a little discussing about the birth chart and some basics about astrology today. And the first thing I want to say is when I was in my 20s and high school, even, everybody picked up the newspaper back then, and we would look at our horoscopes, but it was only the sun sign. And there's so much more about that. And in recent years, I have really dove in to see with my psychic gifts and what's going on planetary wise of how that all aligns. And I met Lauren, and she does my chart for me twice a year, maybe sometimes more. And it really kind of maps it out for you. So the first thing is that it's not really just about your sun sign, is it, Lauren?
It's not. it is much more complex than that. And hello, Mary. It's good to see you. And
You too.
and yes, our sun sign is I suppose it's our identity and really our ego expression. It has a real sort of this is me um, feeling to it. So when we think of ourselves as something, a lot of times that is what we are describing. It's our sun sign. And but we have a moon sign, we have a Mercury sign, we have a Mars sign, Venus, and it goes on into the
So
outer
the
planet.
rising sign, is that known as something else also?
So the rising sign is probably the most difficult thing for me to describe because it encapsulates the whole chart. So it was the sign that was this is the plane. How's it going here? This is the plane of existence, or Earth's plane. And the sign that was rising in the east at the exact moment of your birth, um, you know, that is what stamped you with your rising sign. It's what you wanted to come and do while you were here, on Earth. And and so it sets up your whole birth chart. And it's not a it's not a planet. Like I said, it's just a point. But it's definitely our first impression. People used to say that it was like the mask that we wear, but it's really not. It's more our just sort of general vibe and how we interact with the world. It's that point that, separates us, you know, from the outside world. So, yeah.
It's almost like our unique stamp or blueprint that we have that makes us unique.
Yeah, and what I find so interesting too is that it's we all fit into 12, one of the 12, just like our, north nodes that we, talk about all the time when I talk to you
Yeah,
and do
and
your
now
charts.
that you brought up North Node, what is the
Uh-huh.
North Node?
The north node is it is your it's a destiny point. It's a excuse me. It's a it is dharma. It is really where our soul is wanting to go and in this life. And our south node is always exactly opposite our north node. And that is karma and past lives if you believe in them. And so we're leaving our south node and moving into our north node. So I don't know if you've ever seen like an astrolabe. This is really
Hmm.
dusty, but this is our south node. And this signifies our north node. Okay, so they're mathematical points, but they're extremely important, and I do a lot of work around them. I feel as though you can't. they are what the nodes of the moon are what shows up the most in a person. I feel like I can pick that out the quickest um, when I meet a person. So,
Very interesting because being that my sun sign is Leo
uh-huh.
and, the characteristics of Leo, personally, I feel like I have some of those, but I feel like there's other things in my chart that kind of overpowers that because I'm not that bold, strong, secure, roar like a lion person at all times. And actually growing up, I was more like I think it was a facade of that than my true being. And I don't know if it has to do with that I have the psychic gifts and that was confusing and I kind of stayed, I was kind of insecure about that stuff. But that's why I really find it very interesting because people really do identify themselves as, well, I'm this, and I don't fit with that because it's,
Sure.
and it has nothing to do with that. Your son's, I mean, it does, but it's so much more than that, like your
Right.
compatibility with people.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because we've talked about this before. I think it's been a while, but your sun is conjunct your north node like mine, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, yes. So we have the same north node and the same sun in Leo. And so um both of ours happen to be conjunct one another. And that is what happens if that is the case, is we have those feelings. I remember in junior high, we would always go to a library class after lunchtime. And we would all get the newspaper and we would look at our horoscopes. And I would always read my Leo horoscope and just think, oh my God, this is just not me at all. I mean, I feel like I'm the opposite of this. Well, the
Right.
reason why is because it's it was opposite. My son was opposite my south node, my comfort zone. And
Yeah.
I was still very young, so I hadn't started moving into my north node yet. Okay. And and also my son, I hadn't really moved into my son yet either. Um we are for our whole lives, we're still trying to come into our sun um, and our North Node as well. So it's kind of like a double whammy for us and not feeling like um, excuse my clock, um, but, feeling like we, really didn't identify with Leo. But as I've gotten older, I feel like I I am, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's
Yeah.
the case for you, but and another thing about the North Node is that it's a very scary thing to go towards your North Node. It's almost like you think, how do I even do that? How do I even go towards being a person that I don't even feel like I am? Or how do I go, how do I um, exhibit these behaviors that I that I've never had before. So, this is where the work is. It's where a lot of the work is.
Yeah, and that so because as you were talking, I was thinking of all of the other elements that affect us. First of all, our divine creator gave us free will.
Hmm.
So even though, we feel like we're being drawn to something, the insecurities and fears that creep in block us from doing that. But those insecurities and fears actually come from whatever programs that we received going through this journey of life. So there's so much that really involves everything. And then we're affected so greatly by these planetary alignments, by the moon phases, when the moon affects the tides. We're 70% water. So we're affected by all those things. And then we get this overload of vibrational frequencies. And now, it's really high, the
Mm-hmm.
Schumann resonance and solar flares and all these things. And there's so many people out there that think they're just really losing control when they're really being affected by things outside themselves that they have no understanding for.
Right. And so I would go, and take that a little bit further and say that um, I think it's coming from outside of them, but it's truly coming from, their unconscious parts of them.
Mhm.
And you know, it's it's kind of a hard concept to grasp, but we are, truly it's reflective and it's going on at the same time. And our unconscious mind is always trying to um, set up situations in our lives that in order for us to go through these things and grow from them. Sometimes we grow from them, sometimes we break from them. It just depends on um, your level of consciousness. But we can work with the energy. We can work, and that's such a great, it's a great way to use astrology is to um, realize when, major transits are coming up for you and to try and work with it so you can make the best use of its energy
Mhm.
and a lot of times, not be blindsided. Now there are some planets that do their thing, Saturn and Pluto and Uranus and I guess Neptune. The outer planets seem to blindside us sometimes because it's hard to see. I was talking to someone about Neptune the other day and Neptune transits because I'm about to have a major Neptune transit going through my seventh house. And Neptune kind of puts the rose-colored glasses on you. That delusional sort of diluted part of us sort of comes alive in that area of your life on the lower end of that energy, okay, of Neptune. And
Mhm.
on the higher end, it can be, you know, very lovely. But, um, it, in terms of like a Neptune transit, something might happen. And then we see later that, we just couldn't see what was happening. It's hard to see what we can't see, at
Yeah.
the time.
And
But
hindsight's always 2020.
yes,
It
yes. But if
truly
you
is.
know what's coming, if you know that you're going to have a tendency to behave in that way, then you can be more conscious.
Right. Right. So you mentioned Pluto, and I want to touch on this because of the evolution that is occurring, not just in this country, but worldwide. But is it not true that the United States is in a Pluto return?
We are in a Pluto return. Yes.
And
Um,
Pluto's job is to expose and bring things to the surface.
right. Pluto is transformative and it tears down and destroys things that are no longer viable, are no longer working. Okay.
Right.
So when it's happening on this large collective scale as a country, and especially our first Pluto return, um, it's just going to do its thing.
Right.
Um, for um, at least another decade and a half. And we're gonna, you know, we're gonna see what happens, but you already can see um, what's been going on the past couple of years. But it I think the most um, I'm sorry, I'm just not as clear as I, would like to be. I think it's that full moon that we went through yesterday, and we're still in, by the way.
Right.
But but I think what gives me it makes me feel better, about Pluto transits is that he doesn't just come in and destroy things. He only comes in and destroys what is not needed. So he'll leave. So just imagine like him coming, you know, like a tornado
Cleaning
coming through the
house.
city. He just takes out, some of the stuff that needs it and leaves the structures standing that are okay.
Yeah, yeah, just cleaning house,
Yeah.
just take out
Yeah.
what's not necessary.
Yeah.
And it's so psychically, several years ago, I knew that there was going to be a lot of upheaval and a lot of changes and the things that are happening before I even knew about the Pluto return or the understanding of that. And how many times I receive things psychically and then find out planetary wise how it all aligns. And that's why, with my clients, I have referred so many of them to you because I think it's really such great value knowing your birth chart, understanding what's coming so you can be prepared, as you said, and you have that understanding of what's going around it and being able to work with it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's invaluable information to me. I wish I had known, when I was younger, but I probably wouldn't be where I am today. But
Right.
it all happens when it's supposed to. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I am. It's to me, it's everything. It's like the greatest mystery, the greatest puzzle to figure out. And
Right.
I'll never get bored of it. That's for sure.
Right, because
It
it's
never
so
ends.
vast. I
Mhm.
feel at times that this human mind can't even begin to understand all of it because it is so vast and so great. So, but let's talk about the things that we can understand.
Okay.
So you had mentioned the houses,
Yeah.
and I get kind of confused on that because well, first of all, I'm not an astrologer. I just kind of dabble. But there are all of those, and they all have a different meaning. So when your planets are in the different houses, it creates different things. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yes. So the 12 houses are the areas of your life. Everything in your life fits into those 12 houses. I can give you sort of a generic description in just a second, but the signs, as opposed to the signs that the planets are in, that's kind of the energy that the planet is. Um, it's sort of the robe, sort of the clothing that the planet is in. Okay, and um, how he's going um, to that how that energy is colored. And so when a planet falls into a particular house, and mind you, everyone is going to have empty houses because I only use 10 planets and, we have 12 houses. And so you're bound to have empty houses, at least two. And, uh, and so wherever a planet shows up is where that planet's energy is going to be focused. So, or more so. And so I mean, it's worth paying attention to that area of your life. Like, for instance, I have three planets in my first house and three planets in my 10th house. And the first house is the house of self. And it really is the only house that deals with the self fully. Okay. The way we look, the way we, um, uh, you know, what we give to ourselves, how we adorn ourselves, that kind of thing. Um, and self-improvement in a lot of ways. And the 10th house is the house of your career and reputation and the culmination of your life's work. So so yeah. But do you want me to go through the houses and
Well, yeah, I just want to ask one question
uh-huh.
before you go through each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how often I mean, how quickly does it shift that you're moving from one house to another, or is that change because each planet moves at a different rate, or you really can't have a clear answer on that?
Well, how often, I don't know if I'm understanding your question. Like where do we move through the houses every day? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, like,
Or,
because there's a rotation of how they move around, and the speed in which they do that, I guess, varies by each planet because they all move at different speeds.
oh, yes. So if you are talking about transits, um, and those go around and land in your houses as well, but they don't stay there. So you have your static birth chart with your planets in there that are never going to move. They're there, and were stamped the moment you were born. But the transits that are in the heavens, the planets, move around your chart, as long as you're alive, okay,
Right,
and interact with
right,
your natal or your birth chart planets. And that's what brings about change in our lives.
right,
But yes, each planet moves at a different speed. The moon moves the quickest and it stays in a sign um, for about 2.5 days. Um, and yeah, so.
So you already touched on the first house being of
Mhm.
self. So that's appearance. And I guess that would, if, when we have those moments that we want to change our hairstyle or whatever, we're probably in that first house at that time. Also self-care, regimens and things like that will shift when you're in that first house. So what does the second house give us?
Yeah, so just to expand just a tiny bit more on the first house, what's interesting is that with the first house, it really depends on the planet that's in there and, what it's going to want you to do to the self. So, for instance, I have Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto in my first house, and Saturn and Jupiter are conjunct exactly at the very same degree within, I believe, 4 seconds of one another. I was born um, the day that the Great Conjunction happened in 1981 at its exact peak moment. And so that stamps me with that energy um, of what was going on at the time. And so because Jupiter, the planet that says yes and the planet of abundance is stuck there with Saturn that says no, and it's restriction and limitation and wants you to be very disciplined um and build and develop a lot of self-confidence and all those those um I'm going to be fighting that in myself all the time, trying to balance that in my literal self. Um, so I think that's what makes the first house a little bit different. So but yes, moving into the second house. So say, you know, we're born on the ascendant, that cusp of that first house. Okay. We're born, we are here. Um, you you start to get older and you move, you start to um, you know, your second house starts to develop. And the second house is our self-worth and our value, and it involves food. It's the house of Taurus originally, the first house being the house of Aries. And we start to, you know, Taurus's motto is I have. And so it's really like you know, think of a little bitty, you know, toddler saying, you know, this is mine. This is my teddy bear. This is, you know, everything is mine. And
Hmm.
so that's very, uh, you see how this is a story. So, you know, we're moving to the third house, and that is the house of siblings and communication. And so you start to really talk um, and realize that you know there are other people around, and you start to really think and you know can communicate sort of back and forth and starting to understand language. That is the third house and the house of Gemini. So, moving into the fourth house of the mother and the home and family and your deep ancestral roots, um, you know, that plays out there in in probably a lot of our attachment stuff and our attachment styles,
Right.
um, are there. Yay. Um,
Sometimes yay, sometimes nay.
yeah. And then, and then you move, and you know just having a sense of home and family, you know, that is developed there. You know, this is my crew. And you know, moving into the fifth, we are getting older. You know, different astrologers have different views about, you know, the houses. There are varying opinions about it, but in my opinion, I believe the fifth house correlates to the early teenage years, and so I think that you know the fifth house, the fourth house was Cancer, the house of Cancer. The originally the fifth house is the house of Leo, and so we are starting to have fun and being very creative and noticing our gifts and um, it's possible that we might have a little bit of you know, young love come in at this time. Um, you know, usually it's sort of an immature love, but uh, the
That's
first
funny that you
one,
brought that up because this morning the song that came into my head was Donny Osmond's Puppy Love. I
oh
don't know where
wow,
it came from,
how funny. Yeah,
but
I
that
mean,
kind of
it's
love you're talking about.
yeah, that is the one. It's the you know, it's a the sense of romance has been you know sparked in the fifth house. So, moving into, and this is a very generic description. Like I told you, like everything in our lives fall into these 12 houses. But um, the sixth house is it's the house of the workday and, you know, the details of things. And so we're realizing at this point that we do have to work. It's probably, you know, the time that we get our first job and and we have to be on time. This is the house of Virgo. We have to be um um you know responsible. That's a very Virgo trait as well. We may not even want to do it or be there. That's a very Virgo-y too. They tend to do things that nobody else wants to do. That's that part of us, you know. Um and we have to learn how to deal with coworkers. That's the sixth house as well. Okay. And we're working. in that house. We're developing a sense of a work ethic. So when we cross over into the seventh house, from the sixth house to into the house of Libra, um, this is our when we usually find, someone um, that we want a relationship with. Okay, we're realizing that we want partnership and the value of it. Um, and our shadow gets triggered pretty quickly when this happens, especially, the first one or two, or, relationships, because, nothing triggers the shadow like an intimate relationship. And the
Right.
seventh house cusp is not just that relationship marriage point. It is also, in my opinion, the the shadow point that most of us are trying to integrate. If you know about shadow work, okay,
Yes.
it's that part of us that gets triggered by the partner, and not just the partner. The seventh house is also the house of open enemies. So it gets triggered by those too, all those things that we think we don't like and hate. And, you
Right.
know,
Right.
so
When I counsel people, it's they're soulmate connections, and people think, oh, soulmates is like the true love, but they're really karmic relationships, and they come in so we learn, so we do that shadow work, and that's why you
yes,
can, like, anyone could be actually a soulmate connection. It doesn't have to be an intimate love relationship. It could be a teacher
sure,
or a sibling or something. Yes.
sure. Yeah, our I mean, depending on it, it really depends on um the level of consciousness of the person and how badly the shadow gets triggered. And if we're lucky, we can realize that throughout, life. But as we get older. But it's not yeah, it's very hard to do. It's extremely hard to do. I don't know that I would have ever figured it out had I not um, found astrology. Um, but yes. So, but I can come back to that because I always have a lot to say about, the seventh house and the shadow. Um, but I'll keep going, and if you want to come back to, we
Okay.
can. But so the eighth house, we um the intimate bonding that comes from what happens in the seventh house is found in the eighth house. Okay. And but it's also our shame. We bury our shame in the eighth house. Um we it's it's the things that we hide as opposed to the things that are hidden from us, which would be the 12th house. And but yeah, our secrets, our just it's a very deep house. It's the house of Scorpio. And it's it's just it's the deepest part of us, and it's the death and rebirth house. And so it's and we transform there as well. And so after
Yeah.
we've transformed and had these, death and rebirths, and what do we do with that? Well, we take it to our ninth house of our belief systems and our higher learning. And I believe that um, the ninth house really correlates to university and sort of graduate degrees as well. Some astrologers would disagree with that, like I said, but Um, it makes the most sense to me. But we use the stuff. So, as we move around, the bottom of the chart, and then we peak back up, or peak out, when we get to the seventh house and the house of others, we're moving towards a culmination point at the 10th house cusp or midheaven. But what's happening now too is that you can look back at the other houses and take all the stuff that you've learned and apply it now. Okay. So I always think, of in the ninth house, I'm looking down, I'm looking back at my third house, which is opposite. I'm looking back at those elementary school years and looking how, far I've come in this ninth house. Um, and so we take everything that we've learned, okay, and now we apply it to the 10th house of our career, and 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 we do our thing in the workplace and sort of get our that's where we want to be seen in terms of our life's work. Okay. So the 11th house, so say we're going, and that's the 10th house is the house of Capricorn. So the 11th house is the house of hopes and dreams and friendships. And so and really the collective as well. And so what do we do after we've reached our hopes and dream, or I'm sorry, after we've reached our career goals, and sort of gotten the recognition that we want? Well, then we move into the 11th house of Aquarius, and a lot of times we end up trying to help others or give back, chase um, our hopes and dreams that might not be fully focused on the career. Okay. And yeah, and moving into the 12th house, coming full circle, after we've done all that in the 11th house, we come to realize that spirituality might be what we were after the whole time.
Right.
And into the house of Pisces, and this nebulous house that just doesn't, I hope it's not like on a, geez, sorry, do you hear
What?
my clock? Do you hear
No, I
that?
can't hear it.
Yeah.
I know I got
So
a lot of noises going on outside around me, and I was
oh,
like, I don't know if
I
anybody
have
can
a
hear it.
clock thing. It's from Saturn on my ascendant. I'm sure of it. I'm obsessed with clocks. But so yeah, moving into that 12th house of Pisces, into nothingness, into spiritual practice, and then as we get closer to that, um, you know, to death, we go, and then it all happens again. You
Right,
emerge out of that first house
right.
cusp.
So as you go through this life and go through, your chart, there's a one key theme that runs through all of it is, and you mentioned the shadow work. It is doing that work and taking those cues that we get about the triggers and the relationships, and working through all that stuff and not carrying that baggage around, so we can't fully enjoy the new houses, the new journey, the new direction. And I never knew that you end up in the 12th house of spirituality. Because I say this a lot with clients that, we come in and we're so connected and so trusting, but life and society kind of pulls us away from connection of our spirituality, of our divine truth. And we're on this journey now, bringing us back to that. And we
Hmm.
don't necessarily have to ascend away from this earth to gain that spiritual connection again. And that's the beauty of it. And we can have that inner peace and that joy, that comfort, that intimate spiritual relationship while we walk this life here. But it's a tricky balance because we are influenced by so many things. But that's why it's so important that we work on that, and that is part of that, what I like to say, self-care, soul care, because it's together. And I always use this, we remember to nourish our bodies with food. We have to take that time and remember to nourish our souls. So what does that look like? It's a practice of different things, and it looks differently
Right.
for everyone, obviously, because we are all unique.
Right. And, I think I gave you a really flowery description of the houses and how it can go, but, it can go, say someone, the 12th house is also our house of self-undoing. For some of us, it takes an undoing for us to get to spirituality.
Right,
Um, but, uh, but and I think I might argue that, one kind of has to, in a way. It's just kind of the varying degrees of how bad it is. I guess everyone's rock bottom is different. But
right.
the danger of the 12th house, and I guess the eighth house as well, um, it is that you can stay there. You can get stuck in that energy of self undoing in terms of the 12th house, and slip into addiction. And, I think this is what happens to a lot of people as they get older in life and sort of jaded and seen their, they seen their lives pass them by, and they can become, they can really exhibit um, those the kind of the uglier parts of the 12th house, um, if you're
And,
not
and,
if
and
you're not
as a
careful.
spiritual counselor, I see that as not having that courage to dig in deep and go within and heal the things that need to heal, and putting the blame on all of the other situations, people, things outside of ourselves. And it's that energy, that frequency, because we are all energy. And that's, we talked a little bit about that in the beginning of this. Um,
Hmm.
and so when we're in that negative vortex of, this life is horrible, my life is bad, and it's this one's fault or that one's fault, I never get a break, nothing works out for me. Well, that's what you're going to be keep continuing to attract in. So you're right. If you get stuck in those houses, it is the same thing as getting stuck in that, I have no value. I'm not worth anything. Nothing's going to ever work for me. Always waiting for the next shoe to drop. And it's
Yes.
doesn't have to be that way.
No, and that's the thing too. I think, you saying stuck in the houses, it made me think, I think the danger is getting stuck in the water houses, probably more so than any of the others. Like you said about victimization, that would be the 12th house and Pisces. They're so sensitive that they feel very victimized by life. And
Right.
that's the lower end of Pisces. In terms of the eighth and Scorpio, you can get very bogged down in just self-destructive tendencies. Um, the fourth house of Cancer, you can really experience a lot of arrested development there, because of either attachment issues or just sort of kind of this failure to launch. And so yeah, it does take courage. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like I wish I knew I don't know. It's it's hard to know what it can take to get out of those cycles. Um,
And some may
but
never
shadow
do.
work, yes, is the key.
Yeah. And there's many that never do.
Yeah.
They never get out of that cycle of addiction or victimization, and they leave this life. And my thought on that is they come back rather quickly because they didn't learn that first time around, because that's part of this journey. We're here to learn, evolve, and help each other on this journey to bring us back to home, to that spiritual home.
Yes. It's hard to face ourselves. It's especially hard to accept that we create all of our lives issues.
Right.
And I think probably the biggest challenge or the biggest hurdle to getting people into shadow work is because there seems to be there's some spark that has to happen for you to realize um, that we are creating our reality, and that it's all an inside job. Um, and so I think that's why I like astrology so much and why it's so rewarding to me, because a lot of times a reading for somebody is that spark. So, and they finally get it. They finally feel seen and heard, and and for some reason, astrology tends to alleviate a lot of shame when you get your birth chart done, because you realize that those things that you've kind of always wondered about yourself, like the good things and the not so good things, like they're kind of affirmed to you.
Yeah.
And the things that might have happened to us in life, and we, if someone tells us about those, we're like, it just it creates faith. It makes a person that otherwise might not have, believed in some divine order. Um, it creates a spark a lot of times.
Right. I think that's why I'm so drawn to it, because of the work that I do. And when I do readings, my readings are because I only bring in what is for the highest best for my client at the time of the reading. And many times my readings are confirmation of things they already know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
do any, I don't even know how to read tarot. I receive, I channel the messages. I do use cards as a tool, and especially when I do in person, people like to see something physical.
Yeah.
They laugh because I say I don't even know what the cards mean, but I look at them intuitively, so
Yeah.
it's a different way. But my point is that that's why I'm so drawn to the astrology, because it connects it with what I receive, because
Yeah.
I only open up to receiving those things that are going to help people to confirm the things that they're feeling, to show them that it's not all their fault and that they can work through this, and there's
Yeah.
guides and tools and ways to get through, and it's not the end all be all, and that we do co-create our life and our existence. So
Absolutely. And you know, back to the shadow work part, I think that the shadow shadow work can be done in so many different ways. Like, um,
Absolutely.
yes, looking at your seventh house cusp is going to be a big one and how it comes out in your relationships and maybe people you have a problem with in your life. Um, the fourth house cusp, a lot of that is going to come out with your family members, okay, and looking back at your ancestry possibly. Um, but the seventh house, it, but I feel like in other ways that you can do it is just like being a parent for me is like the ultimate shadow work because I have to be conscious all the time.
Right.
And I'm constantly getting reflected back to me, you know, what I need. And and so I think that and as well, your heart is ripped open like every day by your children. And so it's very humbling. And I think that's where, it has to kind of um that just kind of has to happen. It's a very humbling process. But
Wait till you're a grandmother. That's a
yes,
whole new
yes,
ball game. But I got to say that because of where I am and raising my son, being a parent, doing so much shadow work, and being on my own spiritual journey, I'm more equipped to be the grandmother role and to guide my grandchildren in a very different way than I did with my son because
yes,
of where I am in this journey. Lauren, there's so much that we can continue to talk about, and I want to do this again. I
yes,
think
please.
perhaps maybe even weekly we can get on some of these astrology basics, the connection between the psychic um, uh, messages I receive with the astrology. We could talk about the different ways to do the shadow work. And it's really what works for the individual, but
Yes.
we can talk about the different options and the different tools out there. I mean, we can just go on forever, but I don't want to make this too long of a little podcast
Oh,
here.
yes. An
So
hour has flown
hopefully we'll
by.
be able to do this again next week or whenever our schedules
Sure.
allow. Do you have anything that you would like to say before we stop the recording?
Well, we have quite a few collective transits going on, and so I mean, hang tight. Things are going to, um, Saturn moving into Aries is is going to change a lot collectively in terms of structures and and government likely and and so but yeah I think we're good. I mean, we're out of retrograde, a lot of retrogrades for a little while longer, and well, with Pluto's retrograde, but um, that's all right. But yeah, and if you need a reading, reach out to me or somebody else. That's great
Right. And
information.
the other
Change your
thing is
life.
that we all have to remember that this is all in divine order. And the things that are occurring have to happen. They
Yes,
need to
they do.
happen.
Yes,
And it can be very uncomfortable before it gets to the better.
yes,
So be
yes,
patient, everyone. And
yes.
we will be back as soon as we can in a week or so.
Okay.
Yes, and
Thank you, Mary.
yeah, and I'm going to connect however I can do it, your website and my website if they want astrology or a
Yeah,
psychic reading or whatever.
yeah.
We'll put that information in when we share this.
Sounds
Okay.
great, Mary.
All right,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much.